she did it on purpose. Archie and Lily have finally been unmasked.
Her Royal Highness, despite the fact that she and Harry stepped away from their royal...
They want to give the illusion of the perfect family, but then, of course, they don't want you to know what their children look like.
The palace just did something they've never done before. After years of watching the internet tear itself apart over Harry and Meghan's kids, after every wild theory, every conspiracy spiraling out of control, Buckingham Palace finally spoke up. And listen, when an institution that moves slower than a glacier suddenly decides to break its silence, you know something massive just went down. They didn't release some boring statement. Instead, they went straight for the throat. And what they said about Archie and Lilibet, it's about to flip everything you thought you knew. Because here's the thing, this isn't just another tabloid rumor or some random person stirring the pot. This came from inside the palace walls. And now, both sides are gearing up for a showdown that could change the royal family forever. So buckle up, because this story gets wild. But what the palace is actually sitting on, hit subscribe and the notification bell because this gets absolutely crazy. Drop a like if you're ready for this. Okay, so here's where this whole thing started. Archie Mountbatten Windsor was born on May 6th, 2019, and from day one, it was different. Not the cute royal baby on the hospital steps different. Not the waving and photos different. We're talking full lockdown mode. Harry and Meghan made it clear they wanted privacy, and honestly, at first, people got it. New parents, media pressure, all that. The world had seen what the tabloids did to Diana, what they'd done to Harry his whole life. So when they said they wanted to protect their kids, most people nodded and said fair enough. But then the privacy thing just kept going and going and going. Private christenings with no guest lists released, barely any photos except the occasional carefully controlled shot, hardly any public appearances. The traditional royal baby playbook? Completely thrown out. No hospital photo op, no waving from the balcony at Trooping the Color, no cute appearances at family weddings. These kids were practically ghosts. And listen, I get wanting to protect your children. That's totally valid. But when you're part of the most famous family on the planet and you go completely off-grid with your kids, people are going to talk. And the more they kept the kids out of sight, the more people started asking questions. Innocent questions at first. Simple stuff like, when are we going to see them? Why aren't they at this event? What do they look like now? But when those questions didn't get answered, they turned into something else.
Making it their resentment for not having money for protection. That's it.
Something louder. Something way more intense. Now get this, the internet being the internet. Those questions turned into theories, wild ones. Where were they actually born? Some people swore it was at home in Frogmore Cottage. Others were convinced it was at the Portland Hospital in London. Why are the birth records so vague? Why did the birth certificate get changed? Why haven't we seen them at major family events like Trooping the Color or Christmas at Sandringham? And every time someone tried to answer one question, 5 more popped up. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The whole thing just kept growing bigger and louder and more out of control. Royal forums exploded with debate. YouTube channels dedicated entire series to analyzing every detail. Twitter threads went on for hundreds of tweets, dissecting timelines, comparing statements, looking at official documents. People were zooming in on photos, examining shadows, tracking private jet schedules. Amateur investigators were doing deep dives into hospital protocols and birth registration laws. It got intense. Like, really intense. The kind of intense where people were spending hours, days, weeks going down rabbit holes trying to piece together information that just wasn't there. And through all of this, Buckingham Palace, dead silent. They said absolutely nothing. Not a statement, not a clarification, not even a, hey, everyone needs to calm down. They just watched it all unfold like they were observing some bizarre social experiment from a safe distance. For years, they stuck to their strategy of ignore it and it'll go away. That classic royal approach of never complain, never explain. Don't feed the trolls, don't dignify rumors with responses, just keep calm and carry on. Spoiler alert, it didn't go away, it didn't even slow down, it got worse. Way worse. The rumors multiplied like weeds, one theory would get debunked and 3 more would spring up in its place. The questions kept piling up, getting more specific, more pointed, more aggressive. Comment sections became war zones. People were picking sides, calling each other crazy, demanding answers. And still, the palace said nothing. They thought silence was the dignified approach. They thought people would eventually get bored and move on to the next scandal.
I think a lot of this is just for cameras, the popping up of apparently Uncle Marcus Anderson, who seemingly is there all the time.
They were wrong. The breaking point came when the speculation started affecting how people viewed the children themselves, not as kids who deserved privacy, but as mysteries that needed solving. And that's when the palace finally realized something crucial. Their silence wasn't protecting anyone. It was feeding the beast. It was making everything worse. Every day they said nothing. The theories got more elaborate. The questions got bolder, and the whole situation spiraled further out of control. So after years of saying nothing, after watching the internet rip itself apart with speculation, after letting the rumors grow into something they could barely recognize, the palace finally admitted it. They'd been wrong. Staying quiet didn't make things better. It didn't protect the children. It made people assume the worst. It made them look like they had something to hide. And that's when everything changed. Because when Buckingham Palace decides it's time to speak up after years of deafening silence, after holding their tongue through every conspiracy theory and wild claim, you know they're not playing around anymore. They were done watching from the sidelines. They were done letting the narrative spiral. They were stepping into the ring, and they were coming in swinging. So here's where things got real. After years of radio silence, the palace didn't just drop a boring press release like they usually do. No, they did something way more calculated. A senior palace official, the kind who normally stay so far in the shadows you'd never even know they exist, sat down for what they called an off-the-record briefing. Now, anyone who knows anything about royal protocol knows that off the record is basically code for, we're about to spill some tea, but we want plausible deniability. It's the palace's way of saying things without officially saying them. And the first thing this official admitted, they'd been watching everything, every forum post, every YouTube video, every Twitter thread, every conspiracy theory floating around the internet. The palace had been monitoring it all for years. They weren't just ignoring the chaos like everyone thought. They were cataloging it, tracking it, keeping tabs on every wild theory that popped up. One insider described it as a constant digital storm battering the palace windows. They knew exactly what people were saying, exactly what theories were gaining traction, and exactly how out of control things had gotten.
Everything she's done has only drawn more speculation and brought the controversies back up.
But here's the kicker. The official straight up said the palace had made a mistake. They admitted that keeping everything so private, thinking silence would protect the children, had completely backfired. Instead of calming people down, it made them more suspicious. Instead of protecting Archie and Lilibet, it turned them into internet mysteries. The official dropped this line that pretty much summed up the whole mess. There comes a point where silence no longer protects the children. It feeds the speculation. And honestly, that hit different, because suddenly this wasn't about Harry and Meghan anymore. This wasn't about the palace defending itself. This was about the kids getting caught in the crossfire of a PR disaster nobody knew how to fix. Then came the statement everyone was waiting for. The official said, and I'm quoting here, "There is nothing unusual about their identity. The public simply hasn't seen as much as they expected, And that was a choice made by their parents. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? Case closed, nothing to see here, move along. But listen, the internet doesn't do straightforward. The moment those words hit the press, people started dissecting every syllable. Wait, so the palace is saying it was all Harry and Meghan's call. Were they fine with it? Were there fights behind closed doors? Did they try to push back? The official didn't confirm or deny any tension, which honestly told everyone everything they needed to know. And then things got even more interesting. The official hinted, without directly saying it, that some of the wildest theories circulating online didn't even start in the UK. They pointed to what they called a certain American PR style influence, which was basically the palace's polite way of throwing shade without actually naming names. They said, that's not our culture. We don't operate in a climate of sensationalism. And boom, there it was. The palace wasn't just addressing the rumors. They were taking a shot at the entire narrative machine that had been building around Harry and Meghan for years. They were saying the problem wasn't just the theories. It was the way the whole story was being managed, packaged, and sold to the public. The briefing wrapped up with what reporters later described as the mic drop moment. The official looked straight at the room and said, "The children are unquestionably members of the royal family, and that is the end of the matter." It was firm. It was final. It was meant to shut everything down once and for all, except it didn't. Because the second...
Is it a bad look for Meghan to still refer to herself as a royal?
No.
those words leaked, and of course they leaked, the internet absolutely lost it. People didn't feel reassured. They felt more confused than ever. If there's nothing unusual, why did it take years to say that? If everything's normal, why all the secrecy? If the kids are unquestionably royal, why does it feel like the palace is trying so hard to convince us? The palace had tried to put out the fire, but instead they just poured gasoline on it. They clarified without really clarifying. They explained without really explaining. They opened the door just wide enough for people to peek inside, then slammed it shut again. And that vague, half-answer approach, it didn't calm anyone down. It made everything 10 times worse. So you'd think a statement from Buckingham Palace would calm things down, right? Like, finally, an official word, everyone can relax now. Yeah, no, that's not what happened. Not even close. The moment that briefing leaked, and trust me, it leaked fast, the internet didn't calm down. It exploded. We're talking absolute chaos. Twitter was on fire. Reddit threads were multiplying by the minute. YouTube comment sections turned into full-blown battlegrounds. People weren't satisfied with vague answers. They wanted details. They wanted clarity. They wanted the palace to actually explain something for once, instead of speaking in royal riddles. Morning shows across the globe went into full crisis mode. British breakfast TV looked like they were covering a national emergency. Hosts were pulling in royal experts, body language analysts, PR consultants, anyone who could offer some kind of insight into what the palace was really trying to say. One journalist described the whole situation as trying to force toothpaste back into a tube, which honestly was the nicest way anyone put it. Another commentator flat out called the palace statement a glorified shrug. And over in America, talk show hosts were even more blunt. One said, "They told us it's the end of the matter, but it's obviously not the end of anything." The craziest part, even people who normally couldn't care less about the royal family were suddenly tuned in. Your average person who'd never clicked on a royal story in their life was now reading articles, watching videos, diving into the drama. Because something about the palace's response felt off. It was too vague, too defensive, too trust us without us actually telling you anything.
I loved my time with Meghan. I'm also like, let her promote her show. I'm here to talk about running. Yes, of course. It was.
And when institutions start acting like that, people get suspicious. It's human nature. Behind the scenes at the palace, things were apparently a total mess. Insiders were whispering that some senior staff had been completely blindsided by the briefing. They had no idea it was happening. No heads up. Nothing. There were reports that King Charles was furious the whole situation had been allowed to get this out of control in the first place. And then there was William. Sources claimed he'd been pushing for months to shut down the rumors, decisively. To stop dancing around the issue and just deal with it head on. One quote that got leaked said William told his team, "If we don't handle it now, we won't be able to at all." And here's the thing about William, he hates chaos, especially chaos that could touch his own kids. He grew up watching his mother get torn apart by the media, watched his brother spiral under the pressure, and now he's seeing his niece and nephew become internet conspiracy theories. So, yeah, he wanted it handled. But handling it meant stepping into a minefield, one that had been building since the day Harry and Meghan stepped back and took their children with them. Because ever since that moment, the palace lost control of the narrative around those kids. But somehow they were still getting blamed for everything. The statement was supposed to be the end of it. That was the whole point. Say something official, remind everyone the kids are part of the family, move on. But it didn't work. Because the more the palace insisted there was nothing unusual, the more people felt like there had to be something unusual. It's like when someone says, "Don't worry about it," and that just makes you worry more. The palace's attempt to squash the rumors just gave them new life, new angles, new fuel. People started comparing the statement to past royal announcements, looking for inconsistencies. They were analyzing word choices, reading between every single line, trying to figure out what wasn't being said. And the whole time, one question kept coming up over and over. If everything's so normal, if there's nothing to hide, why did it take years of internet chaos for the palace to finally say something? Why not address it earlier? Why let it spiral so far out of control before stepping in? Those questions didn't have good answers. And that silence, that gap, that's where all the new theories started growing. The palace thought they were closing the door on speculation.
I need to do this for my family. This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something.
Instead, they just opened a dozen new ones. Now, while the palace was dealing with the media circus they'd accidentally created, things over in Montecito were going completely sideways. And when I say sideways, I mean full-on crisis mode. Because here's what Meghan's team wasn't expecting. The palace actually speaking up. For years, the strategy had been pretty simple. Harry and Meghan controlled their own narrative. The palace stayed quiet, and that silence kind of worked in their favor. It let them frame things however they wanted without pushback. But the second Buckingham Palace opened its mouth, that whole dynamic flipped. Sources close to the situation claimed Meghan was not happy, and that's putting it lightly. She wasn't upset about the rumors themselves. She'd been dealing with internet gossip for years at that point. What got to her was the fact that the palace made a statement at all. Because in Meghan's world, in the world of PR and narrative control, whoever speaks first and speaks loudest tends to win. And the palace had just spoken. They'd claimed the conversation, set the tone, and basically told the world, we're addressing this now, not them. For someone who'd spent years carefully crafting every message, every appearance, every statement that felt like losing ground, her team went into overdrive immediately. Within hours, they were reaching out to journalists, calling up influencers, contacting friendly media outlets. They weren't releasing official statements, not yet anyway. That would have looked reactive, like they were scrambling. Instead, they were doing what PR teams call providing context. It's that subtle move where you nudge the coverage in your direction without leaving fingerprints. You drop a quote here, leak a detail there, make sure the right people are hearing your side of things. Classic damage control, textbook stuff. But Harry was in a completely different headspace. Friends close to him said he was exhausted. Not angry, not fighting back, just tired. Years of being in the spotlight, years of fighting with his family, years of watching every single move get dissected online. It had worn him down. And now this whole thing with his kids was blowing up all over again. One friend reportedly told a publication, "This is exactly what he hoped to escape." And honestly, you could feel that in every leaked comment about him.
We don't like you, Meghan Markle. We don't like you. And no amount of posting videos that you think are going to humanize you will make us.
He didn't want to be back in this mess. He just wanted his kids to grow up away from all the noise. But Meghan saw it differently. She wasn't ready to back down, wasn't ready to let the palace control the story. To her, silence meant losing. And losing meant the palace won. So while Harry wanted to stay quiet and let it blow over, Meghan was pushing to respond, to get ahead of it, to make sure their version of events stayed front and center. That tension, that difference in approach, it was apparently causing friction behind closed doors. Harry was pulling back while Meghan was pushing forward, and neither strategy seemed to be working. Meanwhile, back at the palace, they weren't sitting still either. Royal reporters started noticing something weird. Senior staff were getting pulled into last-minute meetings. Lights were staying on in offices that were normally dark by 7 in the evening. The communications wing, which usually moves at the speed of a royal procession, suddenly looked like it was running a military operation. Because the palace knew something the public didn't know yet. They knew Meghan's silence never stays silent for long, and the moment she fired back, the whole situation was going to double, maybe triple in intensity. They were preparing for the counterattack. Strategy sessions, messaging alignment, media monitoring, the whole 9 yards. The palace had spent years playing defense, years letting Harry and Meghan set the narrative while they stayed quiet and dignified. But something had shifted. They weren't playing defense anymore. They were getting ready to push back, and they were doing it with the kind of precision and planning that only an institution with centuries of experience can pull off. The question wasn't if Meghan would respond. It was when and how hard the palace was going to hit back when she did. Just when everyone thought the drama couldn't get any wilder, someone new stepped into the spotlight. A royal cousin. Not one of the big names everyone knows, but someone with just enough connection to matter and just enough distance to speak a little more freely. And what this cousin said, it sent the entire internet into absolute chaos. They gave a quote to a columnist, just one line, but it was enough to make everything explode all over again. There are things the public doesn't know. And if they did, they'd realize the palace has been more patient than anyone can imagine.
It's almost like it's not your child, it's the institution's child. She's saying, no, this is my baby. I was there when she brought him.
That's it. That's all they said. No details, no explanations, no follow-up, just that one cryptic sentence and then silence. But here's the thing about dropping a line like that and walking away. It's like throwing a match into a room full of gasoline. Within an hour, that quote was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube comment sections, everywhere. People were losing their minds trying to figure out what it meant. What don't we know? What has the palace been patient about? What's been happening behind closed doors that we haven't seen? The speculation went into overdrive immediately. Talk shows dedicated entire segments to analyzing those 20-something words. Royal commentators were brought on to decode the message. Body language experts, PR analysts, historians, everyone had a theory. Some people thought it meant there'd been secret meetings that went badly. Others figured it was about visits that got canceled or requests that got ignored. A few went even darker, suggesting it meant the relationship between the palace and the Montecito crew was way worse than anyone realized. The theories were endless, and every single one made the story bigger. But back inside Buckingham Palace, total chaos. Senior staff were reportedly furious. This cousin wasn't authorized to say anything. They weren't part of the official communications strategy. They weren't supposed to be talking to journalists at all. And worst of all, what they said was vague enough to cause massive problems, but specific enough that people knew it meant something real. It was the worst possible combination. One top advisor apparently snapped during a late-night meeting, saying, "If the family can't stop fueling speculation, how do we expect the public to?" And then there was William. He didn't freak out, didn't rage, didn't panic. He stayed calm, cold, calm, the kind of calm that's actually more intimidating than anger. According to insiders, he just said one thing: let it breathe. It's good for people to understand we've been holding back. And that sentence sent a chill through the room, because what William was saying without actually saying it was that he was done protecting Harry and Meghan. He was done playing nice. He was okay with people knowing the palace had been restraining itself, that there was more to the story, that they'd been the ones showing patience while the other side did whatever they wanted.
Would be, which would be different from protocol, and that he wasn't going to receive security.
That was a huge shift. For years, the palace strategy had been protect the family at all costs, even when it hurt them publicly. Don't air dirty laundry, don't fight back, keep everything behind closed doors. But William was signaling something different now. He wasn't interested in protecting a narrative that made the palace look bad anymore. If people wanted to know what really happened, if they wanted to understand the full story, maybe it was time to let them see it. Not all at once, not in some dramatic tell-all, but slowly, carefully, strategically. Let the information drip out bit by bit until people started connecting the dots themselves. Meanwhile, the cousin's comment was still making waves everywhere. American media, which had been pretty friendly to Meghan for years, suddenly started shifting their tone. Outlets that would normally defend her or give her the benefit of the doubt were now asking harder questions. They weren't attacking her, but they weren't automatically siding with her either. The wind was changing and everyone could feel it. Because when someone from inside the royal family, even a minor player, drops a hint that there's a whole other side to the story, people pay attention. And when the palace doesn't immediately shut that person down or deny what they said, people pay even more attention. The silence was loud, and it was strategic. The palace was letting the world wonder, letting the theories build, letting people start to question everything they thought they knew. And then, just when you thought this story couldn't possibly get any crazier, it did. A royal reporter, one of those insiders who somehow always knows what's happening before anyone else, went on morning television and dropped an absolute bombshell. He said, and I quote, "I can confirm the palace is preparing a timeline." The hosts just stared at him. The audience went silent. And social media, it went absolutely nuclear. Because anyone who understands how the palace operates knows exactly what a timeline means. It's not a statement. It's not a clarification. It's receipts. Cold, hard, meticulously documented receipts. In royal speak, a timeline is basically the most polite way to destroy someone. It's not angry, it's not emotional, it's not messy. It's just facts, dates, times, conversations, decisions, all laid out in perfect chronological order. And
it was absolutely amazing. Because
when an institution that keeps records of literally everything decides to compile those records into one devastating document, you know things are about to get serious. This wasn't the palace threatening to fight back with words. This was them threatening to fight back with documentation. The kind of stuff you can't argue with, can't spin, can't explain away. But here's where it got even more intense. The reporter didn't just say the timeline existed. He said it was conditional. He added, if the Sussexes push this further, the timeline will be released. That was the warning shot. The palace wasn't releasing it now. They were holding it like a loaded weapon, finger on the trigger, waiting to see what Harry and Meghan would do next. It was strategic, it was calculated, and it was absolutely chilling. Because what that meant was simple: back off or we'll show the world everything. So what was supposedly in this timeline? According to whispers from royal insiders, it wasn't just basic stuff. We're talking detailed logs of meetings, invitations extended to see the children that got turned down, visits that were canceled last minute, requests from the family that went ignored, every olive branch the palace extended, every attempt to maintain a relationship, every door that got slammed in their face. All of it documented, all of it dated, all of it ready to go public if needed. And if that timeline ever saw the light of day, it wouldn't just be damaging, it would be devastating. The reaction was immediate. Over in Montecito, sources claimed Meghan's team went into full panic mode. Emergency Zoom calls, PR consultants brought in for crisis management, reputation specialists on speed dial, the whole operation scrambling. One insider described the mood as absolutely terrified, because Meghan had built her entire narrative on being the one who was shut out, the one who tried to connect with the family and got rejected. But if the palace had documentation showing the opposite, showing that they were the ones trying and she was the one refusing, that narrative collapses. Everything she'd said, everything she'd implied, it all falls apart. And Harry? This was the moment he finally broke, not in anger, not in defiance, just in exhaustion. Sources close to him said he told people, "I can't keep doing this." 7 words that said everything. He was done. Done with the back and forth, done with the fighting.
It doesn't negate the fact that the damage has been done. There will be forever a cohort within the UK and abroad that will forever associate.
Done with watching his family and his wife tear each other apart in public. He'd spent years trying to protect everyone, trying to keep the peace, trying to make it all work somehow. And it hadn't worked. It had only gotten worse. And now the palace was threatening to release documentation that could destroy whatever relationship was left. But the palace wasn't done making their point. A senior official, speaking through very careful channels, gave a quote that sent chills through everyone who heard it. "We've protected them for years. We won't keep protecting them if it harms the institution." That line was ice cold. It was the palace saying they'd been holding back, they'd been patient, they'd been taking hits to shield Harry and Meghan from worse damage. But that patience had limits, and those limits had just been reached. The institution came first. Always. And if protecting Harry and Meghan meant damaging the monarchy, then they'd stop protecting Harry and Meghan. Simple as that. The gloves were off and everyone knew it. After all that chaos, after the threats and the panic and the cousins' cryptic comments, something strange happened. The palace went completely silent. Not the usual, we don't comment on private matters, silent. This was different. This was calculated, strategic, ice-cold silence. The kind that makes you more nervous than any statement ever could. Because when an institution that just threatened to release a timeline suddenly goes radio quiet, you know they're not backing down. They're planning their next move. Royal reporters noticed it immediately. No more briefings, no more carefully placed quotes in newspapers, no more unnamed sources dropping hints. The palace communications team, which had been working overtime for weeks, suddenly looked like they'd gone into lockdown mode. Meetings behind closed doors, phones off, emails unanswered. It was eerie. And that silence sent a message louder than any press release ever could. The palace was done talking. They'd said what they needed to say, issued their warning, and now they were waiting to see what Meghan and Harry would do next. But Meghan couldn't handle the silence. For someone who'd spent years controlling every narrative, every headline, every angle, radio silence from the other side was torture. Because silence meant she didn't know what they were thinking, didn't know what they were planning, didn't know when or if that timeline was coming.
And in return, Harry and Meghan looked as if they were quite angry that they weren't being treated with respect. They think
Her team kept drafting statements, kept writing responses, kept trying to find the right angle to get ahead of whatever was coming next. But every draft felt wrong. Too defensive made them look weak. Too aggressive made them look paranoid. Too casual made it seem like they didn't care. Nothing worked. And then Meghan made a move that shocked everyone. She went live, not through a PR team, not through a carefully crafted statement, not through a friendly interview. She grabbed her phone and went live on social media. Unscripted, emotional, raw. She talked about being a mother, about the pain of watching people speculate about her children, about the unfairness of institutions with all the power attacking someone just trying to protect her family. She looked exhausted. She sounded frustrated, and for a few minutes, it almost worked. Almost. Because people watching didn't see brave. They saw desperate. Within minutes, the palace responded. Not with anger, not with a matching emotional appeal, not with their own live stream. They released one single sentence through official channels. We remain committed to accuracy. That's it. 5 words. But those 5 words said everything. Because accuracy was code. It meant their records. It meant documentation. It meant the timeline. It was the palace's way of saying, we're not playing the emotion game. We're not fighting on your terms. We have receipts and we're ready to use them if we need to. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. Meghan, emotional and unscripted, versus the palace cold and controlled. Meghan appealing to feelings versus the palace appealing to their documentation. And in that moment, the internet saw exactly what the palace wanted them to see. One side was scrambling and the other side was steady. One side was reacting and the other side was calculating. The optics were brutal and everyone knew it. Behind closed doors, things got even darker. Palace officials reportedly held meetings to discuss what they called public factual clarity measures. That's royal code for we're preparing to release everything. Not hints, not vague statements, not cryptic quotes, everything. The full timeline, the full documentation.
So if you have that judgment based on a stereotype right at the beginning, it's very, very hard to get over that. And a large part of it.
The full story of what happened behind closed doors for the past few years. They were preparing to go nuclear, and Meghan knew it. Sources close to her said she broke down in private for hours because this wasn't like the earlier scandals. This wasn't a tabloid she could dismiss or a random commentator she could ignore. This was Buckingham Palace. And when Buckingham Palace decides to defend itself, it doesn't just defend, it dismantles. Carefully, methodically, and completely. The storm was coming, and there was nowhere left to hide. So where does all this leave us? Here's the reality. The palace broke years of silence. Meghan scrambled to keep control, Harry hit his breaking point, and now both sides are locked in a standoff that nobody seems to know how to end. The timeline is still sitting there, locked and loaded, waiting to be released if things go any further. Meghan's team is still in damage control mode, trying to figure out their next move. And the palace? They're just waiting. Patient, calculated, ready. What's wild about this whole situation is that it never had to get this far. If the palace had spoken up earlier, if Harry and Meghan had handled things differently, if someone, anyone, had just been willing to back down before things spiraled completely out of control, maybe we wouldn't be here. But we are here, and honestly, nobody really knows what happens next. Does the palace release the timeline? Does Meghan push back harder? Does Harry finally step away from all of it? Your guess is as good as mine, but here's what we do know. This isn't over, not even close. Because when you've got an institution with centuries of power on one side and a couple who've built their entire brand on challenging that institution on the other, something's gotta give. The silence right now, that's not peace. That's just the calm before whatever comes next. And when it does come, it's going to be massive. The palace showed their hand. They're not afraid anymore. They're not backing down. And they've made it crystal clear that if protecting Harry and Meghan means damaging the monarchy, they'll choose the monarchy every single time. That's the line in the sand. That's where we are. Two sides, both dug in, both refusing to budge, and a whole world watching to see who blinks first. The storm's been building for years, and now it's finally here. The only question left is how bad it's going to get before it's over.
What was different here was this level of frustration. And I talk about the red mist that I had for so many years.
So, what do you think happens next? Will the palace actually release that timeline, or is this standoff going to last forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more royal drama breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Thanks for watching.